G'day everyone, it's James Davis from the Paxate Academy again, and I've got Rob Zulueta from ConnectOS joining me. How you doing, Rob?
Good, James. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm excited to have you on because you've got so much experience in helping technology businesses look at offshoring resources, and you've done it super successfully over your career. And I wanted to get your wisdom and to help small businesses achieve better success with this type of strategy. So let's dive in. I'm going to put you on the spot, and one of the most common um, issues that I see and challenges for partners that are looking at this kind of thing is really getting their head around the terminology. So I'll ask you, what's the difference between offshoring and outsourcing?
Yeah, look, it's interchangeable. Everyone has their own definitions, but obviously coming, from managed services or TSP, outsourcing is a default to what they provide as a service to their own clients. It's a little bit different when you're talking about outsourcing offshore. You're basically outsourcing the service to where it's outcome based. Offshore is where you're hiring staff that's dedicated to your business. So the main difference is one, you don't necessarily control the staff or the processes, where the other you do. So offshore staffing tends to be the default for most TSPs and MSPs, where they're hiring their own staff.
Well, so what would you typically, why would you typically choose, say, outsourcing over offshoring? What's the advantage to that?
I guess if you look at it fundamentally, right, if you're in the nature of clients outsourcing to you, the last thing they probably want to hear that you're outsourcing to another company, where offshoring is it's your staff, right? I think the big one is a lot of people add complexity because they're not physically in the same country, right? Especially now with remote staffing is staffing, and when you hire staff offshore, it is your staff, right? Obviously, there's a little bit of additional work around, how do you pay them and get IT equipment and things like that. But ultimately, it's your staff, right? You manage them, you just prescribe the processes they need to follow, and all those things as far as tools, using your company emails and things of that nature. But for some reason, because it's in a different country or there's a body of water that separate you, there's all these what ifs or smoke and mirrors that they make things a little bit more complicated than what it has to be.
Okay, so if we're looking at offshoring, you've just mentioned the sort of added added complexity that we put on it and a bit of fear of the unknown. What are the sort of things that you should be looking at before you decide to go down the offshoring route?
Sure. I think internally, without sounding too obvious, for me anyway, is your org structure, right? So what does that look like now, and what should it look like? I think sometimes they're trying to fill the gap or address a pain by just saying, okay, let's hire someone offshore to address that. Where I think holistically, if you look like, what does your structure look like? What do you want it to look like? And then where are the resource gaps? And then go, okay, where does my potential offshore staff assist with that, right? And another thing is, treat it like anything else. It's a project, right? Have a project plan. What are the timelines? What are the milestones? It's funny. People will, when we're buying a new PSA tool or remote monitoring tool, because they're spending, they'll spend all this research time and have a project. But potentially when they're going to hire someone offshore, that could save you 30, 40 grand a year. There's not much planning that goes into that. Where in fact, by hiring that person offshore, basically would make your PSA tool and remote monitoring tool free from the savings that you would have from a salary perspective.
That's really interesting. So, the not having that sort of plan puts you on the back foot. So, what are the sort of challenges that people come across by not having that kind of plan?
Yeah, look, some do. Don't get me wrong. When they hire staff onshore, that they have a proper onboarding and work instructions and KBs and all that. But sometimes they don't, right? And what happens is when they hire someone offshore, that person being remote needs those things in place. Where sometimes you take it for granted. You hire someone, they're sitting beside you. Those things that you may not have documented, well, they're sitting beside you. They can ask that question, and you can help them. Whereas someone remote, you kind of onboard them for a day or two, and now they're stuck to the resources they have available. And look, a lot of people offshore, unfortunately, they don't necessarily want to pick up the phone and call because they feel like, well, I've been trained, right? I should know this, right? And that's where you start seeing that quality gap initially. So, you know, I think the onboarding process should be in place, whether it's onshore or offshore. But like I said, a lot of people kind of don't understand the gaps they truly have because when they're hiring onshore, those gaps aren't so glaring because they're sitting beside them.
And so how do you manage that sort of quality gap once someone's onboarded? Maybe we haven't done it quite right. What do you often see with that challenges that come out of that quality gap?
You look at that's where the output and things like that. There's obviously a little bit of teething going on, and look, you do probably have to invest a little bit more with the offshore team, and but there's benefits in that, as far as obviously the cost savings and then being able to expand your team and maybe getting resources that can do tasks that you normally wouldn't be able to do onshore, like work after hours or public holidays. So you have to invest a little bit more, but I think the returns are well worth it. So, um, apart from that onboarding, I think having someone as that dedicated escalation onshore, someone takes a little bit of ownership. If you're building a team, maybe start with someone a bit senior or maybe a potential leader there as your first hire. So then any second, third hires, there's a local escalation before they have to contact your main team onshore. Um, but look, I think it's no different than onshore. It's just a little bit extra time, I think, to get them settled. Um, and like I said earlier, I think treat it like a project. You have milestones. What does the first week look like? What is the second week? What is month one? What is month two? And making sure those milestones are hit, and then checking that against the quality that you know, it's the output that you want. And if it's not, then revisit, right?
It's sounding to me, from what you're talking about, and probably the experience that I've had at seeing people being successful and not so successful with this kind of stuff, there seems to be a warped expectation with going offshore. I've seen a lot of partners, for some reason, think I can just go offshore. I'm going to have all these savings, and then the team's going to be far more productive than the people onshore. What's your experience with those sort of expectations from people doing offshoring for the first time?
Yeah, look, I think first it's good that they go in with confidence and being positive, but I think there has to be, like I said earlier, some planning around that. Um, and look, it's not instant. It's like a plant. You got to water it. It's not just going to happen right away. I think what happens is they whoever's referred them, or they see people within their network that's done it and were successful. They think they could replicate that overnight, but it's a lot of planning and work around it, and hiring the right people. No different than onshore. It's a little bit of hit or miss, but if you plan well, I think the percentages are high that it's going to go well. Um, I think the big one I see sometimes is they hire, they onboard, and they kind of set and forget, and they just wait for them to produce. Where, like I said earlier, I think you have to do a little bit more initially. Some maybe daily stand-ups, weekly feedback. You got to force it, from their side till they start feeling comfortable to speak up. Like I said, offshore, a few things that are different, even culturally. They're not kind of in Western culture where they'll speak up or call it out. They'll be a little bit hesitant initially till they understand you or get to know you, feel more comfortable around you. And like I said, they're not going to ask for help initially, because they're going to feel like, well, I was trained, I should know this. Where I think you have to kind of not say micromanage, but be a little bit more available. And then look, after month one, two, three, there's they'll start to hit their stride, and then you can kind of start taking a step back.
So I've taken away from that the deliberate integration is super important, and you touched on the cultural differences there. Um, what other cultural differences, especially you're talking especially from the Southeast Asian perspective? What what other cultural differences are there?
I think you just get that even within Australia, right? People from different backgrounds. Probably a little bit even more so with Southeast Asia. Some of them never maybe traveled outside, their country. And this is where actually take a step back when you're recruiting, you can kind of ask for specific requirements, right? Look for staff, obviously that match your position description, but you can ask for people that have an MSP background or TSP background, or are servicing Australian clients now to maybe have that cultural gap a little bit smaller. But even things like they're calling end users, and Australians have certain slangs and things like that they may need time to get up to speed. So I have some clients that I help with. As far as onboarding, there's half a day or day where it's cultural awareness, right? Just even the geography, the capital, the different time zones, and let alone some of the slang, the wording, and a funny one, they're calling someone for an update, and Australians will say, "I'm driving at the moment," right? So you and I know, okay, I'll call you back. Whereas someone else will go, "Yep, and the ticket number is this. Can you give me an update?" And those are the kind of the small things, and vice versa. Coming from a Western country, we kind of need to understand Southeast Asia. Certain things are quite important to them. Religious holidays, things like that, where we maybe not so important. Where for them, they do want that day off. And things like that. So we just have to be aware.
What other things should be aware of? We should be aware of in we use Philippines as the example. What sort of challenges do employees in the Philippines have in Manila with transit time and other geographical challenges?
Yeah, look, obviously traffic is pretty bad. Look, it's just a density thing. So obviously, you having kind of a flexi model or work from home is attractive for them. But you can get office-based staff. I think this is where they actually really like Australians, because it's the few hours that they start early where we would probably go, "Oh, I don't want a 5 a.m., 6 a.m. start." That actually works perfect for them because it beats the traffic, and they're leaving the office before rush hour. So it actually works out really well for them. And the other thing too, when you're looking to set up an office, whether yourself or a partner, location, obviously, just like anything, right? And anywhere, even within Australia, how is your staff going to access the office? Is it near public transportation? That's probably a little bit more important in the Philippines because not everyone has a vehicle. And if they do, again, they don't want to be in traffic for an hour and a half. So public transportation is quite important. Choosing the office location in that sense is quite high. They will actually choose you or the partner you use in Manila almost based off, okay, so where's their office? Because they're not, money aside, they're not particularly going to add another hour to their commute. So.
That that makes sense. And I hear a lot of partners talk about Filipino staff needing to take half days and full days to go to appointments. Is that a legitimate thing, or is that people taking this a little bit?
Yeah, it depends, right? I mean, there's some truth there, but and that's where obviously people have kind of annual leave and things like that to sort that out, and that's where that flexi model helps too. If you have the ability to allow them, obviously if that's not being abused, you don't want that to be abused, but if it's not, and you give them that flexibility, that's where that loyalty will come in. You know, Southeast Asia, I think in particular, look, there's people that are opportunistic and are after money, just like every country. But for the most part, I find them to be quite loyal. And I don't mean this in a bad way. They're kind of risk adverse, right? So if they like you, you treat them well, and those small things, they need that half day, for whatever, and you allow them, again, it just builds that loyalty. They're not just going to job hop to another employer for a few bucks because they know what they get with you. So
Yeah, and I can talk to experience from that, having a Filipino operations coordinator, and I trust her, and she's told me around having to go to the government agencies and health
yeah,
appointments of their transit, and then how long it actually takes to do the appointment. It does add up to half a day just to do some simple things that we take for granted as well. So I think these sort of these sort of differences we're not aware of until we actually engage, and then we're dealing with it reactively. So I think
Yeah.
coming into these sort of engagements, it's good to ask these sort of questions. And I'm curious from your experience, is what should people be asking when they're looking to offshore, or if they're looking for a partner over there, a BPO that's finding them staff? What sort of questions should they be asking?
Yeah, look, and there's different options. You can set up your own to where you partner, right? And I've done both, and I've been offshoring for almost 20 years, and back then they didn't have partners because you had to do it on your own. And there's nothing wrong with either. I like to say if you're going to go and open up your own shop, right, if you will, I like to describe that as you're trying to get an MBA before you get a BA, right? Where if you go through a partner, it's like it's already established, and because ultimately, what's the goal? You want access to talent, right? That's the goal. You don't necessarily want another office lease, and buy equipment, get another internet circuit, pay all that stuff, right? So you want access to talent, and that's where now you have these offshore partners that can get you access to that talent straight away. And I guess if you stick to that option, and then based off that partner, like I said earlier, where are the offices? Because they're not necessarily going to know your brand. Obviously, if you're a big national brand or global brand, they will know. But for the most part, they may not know your brand within their country. They're going to know who the partner you're choosing, right? Are they reputable? Where's the office locations? Do they pay on time? What type of HMO, health cover do they offer? That's default in the Philippines. It's not so much in Australia, but Philippines is like similar to America, where with the employer comes health insurance. So those are the things they're going to look for in your partner. One of the things you want to look for when choosing that is how are they going to attract staff for you, right? One, the recruitment ability, right? The type of candidates you're going to be interviewing, and two, when you do hire someone through them, how are they going to help retain? People ask me sometimes, so what about retention? I kind of say, well, look, the partner probably has 10%, maybe 20% of that. The rest is you, right? Because it's your staff. You hire, manage, train, set a career path, all those things. You're their employer. What the partner does is ensure, do they get paid on time? Do they have a nice office, IT equipment, new and working? All those things, and flexibility with you as an employee to allow you to manage, your staff. I'll give you an example of that. Is I personally experienced this. Someone got an increment, and then I had another member leave the business and said, "Oh, I want to promote that person," and my partner says, "Oh, you can't promote them twice in a year." I'm going, okay, and it's just a blanket rule like that. So you want to kind of look for partners where they have that flexibility. They are treating each client, yourselves, separately, not kind of here's the rule, applies to all. There's some things that that applies, like equal HMO benefits and things like that. But how you manage your staff when you promote them, you want to be able to get that flexibility.
Okay. And you mentioned a few of the sort of the employer requirements around the HMO and that kind of thing. What else should people be aware of in terms of like typical employment conditions and laws over in the Philippines that are a bit different to Australia and New Zealand?
Yeah, look, it's not too different, and that's where you want proper partners. Look, there's a variety. You have some that kind of package it differently, and this is where you have to do your due diligence. You have some that are, maybe an upgrade to Upwork, if you will, but they are just passing through your payment to them to your employee, but that employee is responsible for contributing to their taxes, doing all those things, right? And then you have partners that do the whole thing where they're employing them as a full-time employee on your behalf and making sure those government statutory payments are being made. They have annual leave, all those things that you're treating your employee as you would in Australia, especially now with all these things as far as anti-slavery and all those things. So you want to make sure your partner's doing that, and you can do that a few ways. especially around the invoicing. Just say, so what exactly am I paying for, right? And what I mean by that is sometimes you just get a I guess salary total, right? Say, okay, Mike is $2,500 a month. What does that mean, right? Is he getting $500 and the 2,000 is your partner? Where a lot of partners now are quite transparent, and they'll give you an itemized salary invoice, so you see how much is going to your employee, how much is going to taxes, how much is going to HMO, how much your partner is making, right? And some don't. I'm not saying that's wrong, but yeah, it's you kind of want to know where your money's going.
Can you briefly explain the 13th pay month in the
Yeah.
Philippines?
So look, it's effectively a bonus, but it's mandatory by the government, right? Which, yeah, I don't know if that's right or wrong, but I think that's a good thing. Look, I've offshored in various countries. So Malaysia, it's pretty much a standard that the company does it. It's not a government mandate, but the company does it. And if you don't do it as a company, you're not competitive because every other company does it, right? Where in the Philippines, it's the other way around. The government said you must pay a 13th month bonus. So the good thing is you don't necessarily have to give a separate bonus. They're going to get that, which is usually payable, I believe, before Christmas. So usually businesses pay that out in November or December by law. It must be paid in that calendar year. So you can effectively say, well, I am giving a bonus. Now the difference is that's not against targets. That is by law. So if they were to resign, that must be paid out as far as accrued. So what you can do on top of that, if you do have that budget, is you can give what we kind of coined a 14th month salary, which is a bonus or a KPI bonus. A strategy around that I like to tell people is give that mid-year, right? So they're getting that 13th month kind of December, and then if you give a mid-year, which aligns perfectly with Australia, if you think about the financial year ending in June, and you can give a bonus in July. What that does is, if they're not saying looking to leave, but every 6 months they're getting this injection of, almost equivalent to 1 month's salary, which is pretty competitive if you think about if they have to go somewhere else. That new employer has to, at minimum, match that, right?
Yeah, okay. And in terms of termination, I think there's a lot of misinformation or misaligned expectations of when we offshore. How does termination typically work with offshoring?
Yeah, look, I guess black and white, there are HR regulations, right? Just like labor laws in Australia, same labor laws in the Philippines apply to protect the employee, right? And if your partner is abiding by that, obviously that's why also choosing the right partner to ensure they're not mistreating employees. So you would follow the normal protocol, right? Like before probation, 6 months typically. The term they coin is regularization. It's usually that kind of 30-day. You have that 30-day notice that if they're not performing. After that, you kind of follow the same protocols where you use your partner's HR team and say they're not performing, and you want to put those things in place. Look, they're probably not as strict as Australia when it comes to terminating, but it's not to where you can just get rid of someone tomorrow because you don't like them. But it's not. Yeah, it's still definitely not as strict as Australia, and that's where the other side of that is your partner agreement, contract, whatever you want to call it. Some of them require a deposit. Some of them actually have a contract, right? Which kind of, if you think about it, is a little bit inflexible when if you have staff not performing, but you're committed to a 1-year contract. How does that work, right? So you want to look at that as well. What did you sign up from a service agreement standpoint? Look, typically what you want is no deposit, no contract. You have your employee and you manage them as you would your Australian employee. And when you feel that they're not performing, you probably want to go through a coaching plan. It's still not working, you want to go through a performance improvement plan. Still not working, you terminate them, right? So you typically want to follow those protocols. Can that happen in 30 days? Possibly.
Like you said, it sort of comes back to what the arrangement is that you've set up, and this is that misalignment of understanding what's outsourcing and what's offshored employment.
Yeah.
And this is why it's so important, because it's very different. Talk to me about the typical recruitment process uh, for finding people.
Yeah, look, not too different to Australia. You draft up a position description, um, and then you engage with your offshore partner if they have internal recruitment team, which is ideal. Look, some are vary in size, so some actually outsource that to a third party headhunter or recruitment. So if you're getting a headhunter fee, then that's probably the reason why. Look, that sometimes happens too if it's a very niche role. So it's not unusual, but obviously you just be prepared if there's additional recruitment costs. Again, you can see that depending on the size of your partner. The bigger partners, you're not going to get that fee, and they have a large recruitment team. And then once that position description is provided, they do normal post it on the equivalent of what would be a Seek job board, passive search on LinkedIn. Again, the bigger partners will have a recruitment team that would probably have 30 to 50,000 connections on LinkedIn and whatnot. So there's that passive search. Partners would also use their own ATS system, which is recruitment software. So you would have an existing database, right? So hopefully, if you say here's a level 1 service desk, there's probably a pool available if the recruitment team is mature. Let alone posting it online and things like that if you have specific needs. Usually, depending on the role, I like to say it should be around 7 to 10 business days till you get shortlisted candidates. Again, niche roles could take a little bit longer. And it depends on your requirements. If you have something permanent night shift and things like that, again, the take up might be slightly slower, but typically 7-10 days if it's a standard role. And the other thing you want to think about, again, with the partner is, are they just flicking CVs at you, or are they doing that proper screening, right? Doing proper shortlisting to where it's not wasting your time. You should be getting 3 or 4 candidates that you're prepared to hire one. Ideally, any 4 you'd like, but you're going to hire the best, right? But if they're throwing you a batch of 3 or 4 and you're kind of flicking away the CVs, and that's already a sign that you're kind of going, okay, so how mature is the recruitment team when I'm kind of rejecting it at a paper level, not even wanting to speak to them.
Is there any times of the year that's more difficult or easier to do recruitment?
Yeah, well, Christmas, as I mentioned, one in the country's predominantly Catholic, so everyone takes leave during that time, and the 13th month bonus. So if they're going to leave, they're going to wait for that 13th month bonus, go on holiday, and then start looking for a new job in January, February. And that's why if we go back to the other point and say, well, if you have it within your budget to give a 14th month bonus, if you will, and you apply that mid-year, that's when that kind of offsets that December resignation. So, and that works in reverse. So if you're looking around that time, look, it's not impossible. We hire all year round. There's candidates available, but December, January, not too different than here. It's a little bit quieter because people don't want to think about that, right? Where are they going to work next, or things like that. But again, it comes back to your partner. I said earlier about the recruitment team, how mature they are. If it's a good, mature team, they're already passive searching. They're already planting the seeds with some people that may not even be looking. Look, I have this client. They're looking to hire you. You look like a proper fit. You're free to chat with them in January. No obligations. And if your partner has a good recruitment team, they're already setting those conversations up. But yeah, look, I typically say December is not the best time. Easter maybe, but because again, that's the second biggest Catholic holiday. But usually end of year.
Yeah, okay. And what sort of roles, if you were to talk to your experience, what sort of roles would you look to offshore into the Philippines? What's possible?
Look, pretty much anything now. Obviously those niche roles, which is hard in any country, to be honest. I find what's funny, obviously, my background is was MSP, TSP, so technical roles, build very large teams, technical teams offshore, level 1 to level 4, and so it can be done. But when I talk to companies, whatever they may be, and they go for technical roles, and I'm like going, actually, that's probably the hardest to do. You talk about it all the time. Go for a sales support role. Go for a bookkeeper for your accounting team. Go for a virtual assistant. Those roles are very easy to get, and very easy to train. So for me, to be honest, we kind of default, oh, we're a technical company, so let's go for the technical roles, which makes natural sense. But sometimes your business needs, other areas that could benefit from offshore. But look, start with traditional service desk level 1. I think sometimes too those back end skills that you need, your monitoring tool admin, or your PSA tool admin, or maybe backup and patching after hours, especially maybe those non-client facing roles, so you don't necessarily have to have that conversation with your client right now. So have a think about it. Every company's different. Everyone has different pain points. So
I hear a concern from partners when I talk to them about offshoring for the first time. It's always about putting offshore resources in front of their clients. Do you think that's a real concern?
I think it is if it is for them, right? And everyone has different client bases, so I think it's valid. But at the same time, I think a lot of clients are now aware of it's a global environment, right? They themselves are probably using offshore in some sense, whether for marketing or data entry, who knows. So I think it's how you as a business decide how you're going to have that discussion. I consulted with a decent size managed service provider, and I said, look, the first step is get your sales team to start having a coffee with their clients and say, this is what we're thinking of doing in the next 6-12 months, and this is how you're going to benefit, right? And not to put on a sales hat, but I usually say, so how are they going to benefit, right? And think about what your business can do now that you're going to introduce this. Maybe you can give extended hour support or answer the phones faster. Your ticket SLAs will be quicker. That's what they're going to get. They're not going to pay you for anything anymore. They're not paying any more or any less. All you're doing now is by you doing this as a business, you're able to deliver more, right? And that's hard to say no to that if you're a client, right? But sometimes what we do as a business, we're already thinking about that 5%. They're not gonna like this, rather than the majority that this is actually going to benefit, them and your business. But they're trying to find a solution that will make 100% of everyone happy, which is not always the case. And that's what I said earlier. Maybe start with roles that if you're hiring a backend admin to manage your ConnectOS or your Kaseya, do you necessarily have to disclose that to your client? Maybe not, but as you start getting mature around offshore and feeling that confidence about having those roles that are client facing, but you maybe know what you're doing already, or you have a good story around that.
Yeah, it's some great advice, and I usually throw out a bit more challenge around. Most people are worried about the English and the accent, and it comes down to who you hire, but also the majority of us already have people in our office with accents already that our clients love. So what does it matter where they are? And a lot of owners don't click to that when they're thinking about this. So we've covered so much ground here, and I think you've shared a lot of good wisdom to help people that are looking at doing offshoring for the first time. To wrap up, what do you want people to take away from this conversation? If there's one thing and some next actions out of this, what would you want to leave us with?
Yeah, look, I think it's not as complex as people, try to make it out to be in their own minds. I think back to the beginning, it is as simple as, I think, planning. Look internally. What does your structure look like? Don't try to see this offshore as a fix for the pain that you can't address onshore. What makes you think the offshore is going to fix that? But look at your structure. Look at what that structure should look like in 12, 24 months, and then you see how does offshore help you get there, right? and then the processes. How are you going to help that employee offshore be as successful as they can, and support them with the right processes and onboarding? I think if you start out fundamentally, like I said earlier, treat it as a project, right? Put milestones, timelines, and make sure those timelines are hit, because that will show the quality is there. And if it's not, revisit the training, right? And keep going at it. What you have to ask yourself is, so many businesses do it and they're successful. And if you're not doing it, your competitors are. All right. And ultimately say, this is for clients. So at some point, your cost base is going to either help you win or not win these clients, because someone else is going to do it. And at some point, their service is going to be as good, if not better, than yours in a hybrid model. But now they have a more competitive cost base than you do. So look, I get there's still that everything is onshore selling point. There's still a market for that, but yeah, I think just preparation and yeah, and speak to your network. Other people have done it. Pick each other's brains. I think there's room for everyone to be successful and help each other.
I think that's some awesome advice, and I'd provide as well. I've seen quite a few people, partners that have been quite successful at offshoring. They've got another value point to engage with their clients, because what's happening is other industries are starting to look at offshoring for cost competitiveness as well. And if you've been there and done that, who do you think they're going to talk to in terms of making it successful? So it's taking the conversation out of that deep technical level up to helping them solve their business challenges, and leveraging technology to become a more global company. So lots of opportunity out there. It's been awesome having you, Rob, and I really
Thanks for having
appreciate
me.
your time. Well, and I have no doubt I'll bring you on again to talk about how do you go from the starting point to being more successful, and growing out that team and in different ways. So
Yeah,
thanks for your time.
absolutely. Thank you.